Well, good evening out there, race fans. I'm Greg Drace. Welcome to the 802 Cup Series podcast, which you can hear weekly live on Twitch, also YouTube, Anchor.fm, Spotify, Google, Amazon, and Apple Podcasts. This is the 802 Cup Series podcast, and we run Cup Series cars, the next gen cars, every Sunday on iRacing. We practice at 6:45. Green flag about 7:15. We're in the middle of our playoff season right now. We will be recruiting during the month of April for season 3. So if you're interested, you can reach out to the 802 iRacing Leagues page on Facebook, or you can send me a message through Anchor FM or hop on Twitch and send me a message there. I'd like to send out a thanks to our sponsors and our broadcaster. Ghost Racing Network is joining us for the end of the season, along with Extreme Sim TV. Riptide Radio, thank you, number 9, Jeff Barefoot, for every week picking a random finisher. And courtesy of Riptide Radio, the winner gets $5 in iRacing credits. DTL Customs, Dave Lomaga. He does all our league graphics as well. He's one of our admins. Also, currently one of the 7 playoff drivers. Does a really great job on custom graphics as DTL Customs. Give him a holler on Facebook or look him up on our iRacing League. The 802 Cup Series is part of the Sim Racing podcast, where we also do the Joe Sixpack Racing podcast, where we interview anybody and anybody that does anything racing related, mostly sim racing, but we were lucky one time. Probably one of the coolest guests and most interesting, and one of the longest podcasts, running almost 2 hours, was the grandson of, I can't remember the team name or this guy's name, but it was a great interview. He was the grandson of the driver that passed Dale Earnhardt on the final lap to win that team's only Daytona 500, and he talked about stories of what they did after the race. I said, "What was Dale Jr. like in the pits?" And he says, "Well, he was pretty pissed off. He yelled at my grandpa and then said, 'Let's go out for a couple of beers.'" So that's what happens on the Sim Racing podcast and the 802 Cup Series podcast. We get guests to come in and talk about racing. If you want to talk about racing, love to have you. We broadcast on the Wainwright Broadcasting System, where we also do the Indoor Gardener podcast. New episode coming out tomorrow. The Dive Bar podcast, as well as Curmudgeon Radio. So let's take a look this week at our race. Was at Kansas this week, and it was one heck of a race. 125 laps. The only caution was the competition caution that came out at lap 40. Average lap time for that race was 33.668 seconds. We completed all 125 laps, no green, white checker cautions, 7 lead changes, good strength of field at 15.89, and average safety rating was 3.46, which is pretty good for a laid back league like ours. So let's take a look and see who finished where on the top 10 for the Sunflower 125. First place was Rob Lowell, and he led 35 laps. He qualified 10th. Second place, Frank Zingen, driver of the car 62. He started in 12th. He led 3 laps. Cole Jarrett finished the podium at P3, started 5, not leading any laps. Brandon Guerin, my guest from last week, he finished in P4. Larry Murphy, the car number 30, finished P5. He led 5 laps. Jason Wiley, driver number 13, finished 6th. He qualified 3rd. He led 1 lap. 7th place was Chris Maxon, the car number 121. He led a lap, and he qualified 9th. And looky there, 2 out of the last 3 races, I was lucky enough to finish in the top 10. I usually get a little stronger towards the end of the season. I drive the car number 65. I qualified 8th, finished 8th. Didn't lead any laps, though. I got a couple in last week. P9, Eli Raposa in car number 46. He started 13th, finished 9th, and rounding out the top 10, Johnny Barker in P10, car number 6. He started 15th, and he finished in 10th place. Coming up this week, we are going to Talladega tell you what's going to be going on, some of the setups for that race there. Race time is going to be at 2:49 p.m. track time and 78 degrees, 55% humidity, and wind 2 miles per hour out of the north. So you know what happens at Dega? Everything gets a little crazy, even though it's a super speedway and it's not that hard to drive on. But you know what happens when you get on a track like that. So we gave you the weather there. And the car setup for this week is 75% fuel, 3 tire changes. Qualifying and racing setup is the Talladega.stock setup on iRacing. Practice length will be 25 minutes. We go live on iRacing at 6:45 p.m. Sunday. 2 laps of qualifying. This will be an 85-lap race, 2 fast repairs, 2 green-white checkers. And now let's take a look at our playoff standings this coming week. Frank Zingen still holds on to first place. He's got 2 wins for the season, 1,152 playoff points. Brandon Garand is in P2. He's now 11 points behind Frank Zingen, the leader. He's got 1141. Chris Max is in third place at 1138. So P2 on back to about P4 starts to tighten up a little bit. Dave Lamaga is in fourth place with 1,131 points. He's got 2 wins on the season. In P5 is Rob Lowell with 1,130 points. He's got 4 wins on the season. P6 is Johnny Barker with 1,122 points. No wins on the season. Rounding out the top 7 for the playoff series is John Bewley. He's got 1,113 points and 1 win on the season. And that about wraps it up for our show here tonight. We did have a scheduled guest and sent him the link and everything yesterday. And unfortunately, he sounds like he didn't get home in time to make it. So we'll see what we can do for next week and get a guest on here from the Joe Sixpack, not Joe Sixpack Racing League. That was last year. From the 80 Cup Series. We'll have hopefully try to get the winner in here from Talladega. In closing, I'd like to say thank you to everybody for listening to the 802 Cup Series. It will be uploaded tonight to YouTube, tomorrow to Anchor, and all the other podcast platforms out there. And well as a thank you out there to the Ghost Racing Network for joining us. And also want to let you know that coming soon is the Super Late Model Short Track Series from the 802 Racing League. You want some information on that? Check out the league on iRacing. Check out our page on Facebook, 802 iRacing Leagues. Send a message and ask how to join. Also, remember, Season 3 recruiting is coming up in April, and we'll be starting that Season 3 series in May. And the Super Late Model Short Track Series coming up in April. For the 802 Cup Series podcast and Wainwright Broadcasting, thanks for listening. I'm Greg Drace, your host, and we'll see you next week. Good night.